anyone who's looking to get into multifamily, don't let any of this scare you. All of this stuff that we're talking about, the doom and gloom and the headlines, that only affects people who already own buildings from like 21 and 22. If you are getting in and starting now, this is like the golden opportunity that we've been waiting for the last 10 years.
I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. So I have Andrew Cusman with me, and we were just saying, and we're going to start right in the middle of this, we were just saying that right now, what's happening in your industry is going to be juicy. So we're going to reorder the questions. We're going to start with bottom line, what's your history, Andrew? And then let's go straight into that one, because that's my juicy question.
Yeah, history is graduated Texas A&M as a chemical engineer, but that was just a placeholder. I knew I didn't want to do engineering, but I figured if I got an engineering degree, I would always have a job and make a decent living, and it's something I could at least tolerate until I figured out my real calling. Got married. My wife had a similar outlook, and it took us 7.5 years and a bunch of other little things that we tried, but we discovered flipping in 2006, and living in Southern California where there's tons of equity, I would never buy and hold here I would never want to be a landlord here,
Yeah.
but it's a fantastic place to flip.
Fantastic.
And so we flipped our first one in 2007, right as the great financial crisis was getting geared up to start.
Yeah.
So I said this is actually going to be a great time because there's going to be lots of distress. So I did the opposite of everybody else, went and quit my job and went into real estate as the real estate market crashed. It was great because for the first 2 years we had no competition. And then after a while, people started figuring it out. So my wife and I were like, okay, this has been great. But number one, it's actually just another full-time job because you're only as good as the last deal that you did. You put a nice check in the bank and you got nothing left. I mean, that's great, but you don't have anything else to show for it afterwards. And we said, well, what's the next big thing? And we reasoned, okay, we just had a huge recession, which means we're probably going to have a long expansion, which means job creation, household formation, rising incomes. And we couple that with the fact that everybody who owned a house either got foreclosed on or knows somebody who got foreclosed on, and they're either can't buy a house for the next 7 years or they're going to be scared to buy a house for the next 7 years. So you put those two things together, and to us, that said there's going to be a huge and growing rental pool or renter pool. So, all right, we want to get ahead of that. We're going to go into apartments. Hired a mentor who became a friend and partner eventually. And since then, we've been the sole GP in about 2,700 units, all in the Southeast United States. And it's been a really good, fun, and exciting business. So.
Who's been your mentor? I didn't know that. Who's been your mentor?
Yes. Well, so our original flipping mentor was a lady named Alexis McGee out of Sacramento, California. And then the guy who we learned the multifamily business from, his name is Mike Ballard. He doesn't do any coaching or anything like that anymore. But him and his partner, they're somewhere around 3,000 units, and they're still in the business and good friends at this point.
Wow. Okay. I'm glad that you guys are still in it together. That's fantastic. So it gives me a sense of the background, but let's go ahead and go into, like, now that you're truly from Flipper, you're now really a multifamily syndicator. So let's focus on that for a minute. Like I said, we can, I'll double back to your company, but let's get deep into what you think that's happening in your industry right now. So clarify your industry and the name of your company, right? And then what is your industry facing right now?
Yeah, so our company is Vantage Point Acquisitions, and that reflects the number one mistake that most new syndicators make, and that's they focus on acquisitions. It has the most important part is the asset management. That is where money is made in multifamily. In flipping, it's made on the acquisition largely, but in multifamily, it's made on the operation. So we're Vantage Point Acquisitions. It really should be Vantage Point Capital or something like that, but after 12 years, we're not going to change it.
No, you don't want to change your brand midstream. Just stay with it.
No, so that's that's the name of our company, and you are correct. We do solely multifamily. Our goal is to go an inch wide and a mile deep. We want to be the best experts we can be at one thing, and that is garden style, which typically means 1 to 3 story workforce housing, so B- to A- class value add apartment complexes in the Southeast United States.
Okay.
And so that is the very specific thing that we do. We don't do industrial. We don't do self storage. Not that those are bad investments. And actually, if
Yeah,
you're
that's
an
okay.
LP, and especially if you're a full time LP, I would recommend, yes, diversify into that kind of stuff. But what we've decided, hey, we're going to try to be really, really good at one thing, and that is that type of apartment complex and that type of asset. So.
All right. Well, that type of asset is going to be the one I believe that's going to be hardest hit in the whole real estate sector after office. Office being really badly hit from COVID. But I think the next piece that's going to be suffering, that we're going to notice is suffering, is the multifamily and not the single family because of the dynamics and having to do with we really don't have enough housing, but we still have this interest rate thing. Multifamily is more sensitive to interest rate resets than single families are. We've got 74% of the single families have interest rates that are under 4%. They're expecting a lot of stickiness in the single family market, right?
Mhm.
Because people aren't going to want to move, and a lot of people moved during COVID, so they're not that unhappy with their houses. But multifamily being more vulnerable in that area, what are you seeing, and how is your company lining up for it?
So yeah, and that's one of the key differentiating factors between the single family market and anything in commercial is the vast majority of us on our single family houses have a 30-year fixed mortgage,
Right.
right? Whatever you get it and you can set it and forget it, right? And for 30 years you can ride that out. In the commercial world, it's typically 3, 5, 7, 10, maybe 12-year loans. And that's the vast majority. There's a few exceptions where you can get a longer term, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm going to say 90% is 10 years or less. And
Well,
then what
I
happens,
have to agree with that. 90% or more is 10 years or less. Yeah.
yeah. And so what happened, what makes that important is, someone who bought a property in 2021 at a 3.5% interest rate. Now, and let's say they got a 3-year loan term. Well, now that loan it comes due in 2024,
Mhm.
and they have to refinance. Well, guess now the interest rate might be 8%, and all of a sudden the property doesn't, especially if it wasn't value add, it's not, and it's not doing well operationally. And all of a sudden that property, even though nothing really happened with the property, it's
Mhm.
fine. Like the tenants
Mhm.
are like, "No, everything's good here." Um, the property doesn't have enough cash flow to support that new mortgage payment. And even if it does, the lender might say, well, the value's come down 25%. So, yeah, you're trying to refinance an $8 million loan, but we're going to give you 6 because we don't like the current value of the property.
Right.
So it's a really interesting situation where there's stress and there's distress. Distress to me talks about a property where there's problems. Maybe the vacancy is really high, there's crime, there's deferred maintenance, the water lines break every 36 hours, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Stress is on the operator and financial side, where again, the property itself is just fine in terms of operations. Like you drive by it, looks like a nice place to live, but the financing and the debt behind it no longer works, and that puts a lot of operators in a situation where they can't. There's multiple levels of this, but what we're seeing out there, I'll give you an example. I won't name names, but
Good.
we looked at a
Appreciate it.
portfolio. Although you could throw a dart these days and hit a group that's in similar situations, but
Yes, you
um,
could actually. Yes.
Y-
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost to the point like, well, yeah. But so we just looked at a group that's selling a portfolio of 12 properties that they bought almost all of them in 2021 and 2022.
Mm.
And
Yes.
they're selling, every one of them is going to trade at a price point where, if they're lucky, where 100% of investor equity is going to be lost. And the couple that we made offers on, our offer was actually below the level of the debt on the property,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So maybe they bought it for 12 million, they got a loan for 8. We're now offering them 7 million. And a couple of colleagues of mine that are, in the same business also are putting offers on some of these properties, and they're doing the same thing. Their offer is less than the debt. So we are now in the, formerly unimaginable situation of talking about how do you do a short sale on an apartment complex.
That's right.
A vast change from 18 months ago.
Yeah, fast change. And it is, I think it's significant and important that part of the reason why you have to offer that price, the reason why you're driven to create that lower price isn't just because you guys are like, oh yay, I can get a lower price, let's do it. No, it's the actual numbers. Why don't you dive into that so people can be educated in that?
Yeah. So, commercial property trades on what's generally called a cap rate, right? And
Hmm.
we don't want to get too into the weeds of that. And
Yeah, we
candidly,
don't.
I think people overemphasize that. But basically, it's short for capitalization rate. And the idea is okay, if you put capital into this property, what is the rate of how fast it basically pays that capital back? So if you buy it based on the purchase price, so if you buy a property for $1 million and every year it produces a net operating income of $50,000, that's a 5% cap rate. So beyond that, really just look at cap rate as a way of measuring how investors value a particular income stream. The lower the cap rate, the more in demand that income stream is.
Hmm.
So like a beautiful A class apartment complex, might be a 5% cap rate,
Right.
and whereas a 1960s mobile home community might be a 10% cap rate, because the higher cap rate represents the fact that people see more risk there and they just see it as a less desirable type of asset to own. So don't worry about the weeds of cap rates, other than the lower it is, the more
Yes,
demand there is for it, the
that's right.
higher it is, the less
It's
demand.
it's a reverse indicator, right?
Yeah,
The
it's a
lower
reverse
it is, the more
inverse
demand.
indicator. Yep,
The higher
exactly.
it is, actually less demand. Yep.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of factors, but one of the biggest factors that determines cap rates are interest rates.
Yeah.
And they're not directly correlated perfectly, but
No.
they do tend to kind of walk hand in hand. And essentially the reason being is, when interest rates were zero and you have all this money out in the world that needs to grow and earn a return, they say, well, okay, I can buy bonds and get zero, or I can invest in apartments and get 4%. Well, now that you can buy a 4-week treasury bill and get
Percent.
5%,
Yes, you can.
all of a sudden that dramatically reduces the demand for a 4% apartment complex. So what has to happen? Well, now that apartment complex has to be at a 6% cap rate, so
Hmm.
it has to go up. Well, why is that important? Well, if you go back to the original analogy of, hey, I paid $1 million for this and it produced 50,000. Well, in order to be worth $1 million at a 6% cap rate, now it has to produce 60,000.
60,000.
But if
Or
it's still producing 50,
that's right.
the reverse has to happen. The price
It
has
has
to
to
come
go
down.
down.
And so that is what has driven, I would say, depending on the asset type and the market, anywhere from a 20 to 30% decline from the peak pricing, which I would call Q1 of 2022,
Okay.
in apartments. It's not that performance has come down. I mean, has maybe in some areas where insurance has doubled or tripled, that has affected things.
There is
But
that.
but the biggest
Florida.
factor is just that, um, capital is saying, well, hey, I love the asset. We want to own it. We see the long-term fundamentals are solid. However, whereas 2 years ago, I could have bought your property, Mr. Seller, with a 3.5% interest rate. Now I'm paying 7.
That's
So I
that's
have to offer you less to
that's
get
right.
the same return. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. That's where the rubber meets the road on both sides. When you're talking from an appraiser side, we're talking about cap rate. We're talking about comparable cap rates versus cash flow. But when you're talking about making an offer from your side and having it actually work, it's literally like, I understand you were able to praise this at that value, or you were able to buy in at that value because you were anticipating a 3% on your note, but we're anticipating a 7% on our note. Our literal payment has gone up. And you're right, in Florida, and I don't know what other states there is, but in Florida in particular, insurance has tripled.
Yeah, Texas has seen insurance triple. We
Okay.
were very fortunate. Our Florida portfolio only went up 67%.
Whoa,
Um,
woohoo, congratulations.
but
I've
you know
heard
what?
I've heard tripling on some buildings. So
Oh no, I know. I unfortunately have friends who their portfolio. This just happened 2 weeks ago. Their portfolio wide insurance premiums were $1 million annually.
mm.
When they renewed it in October, it went to 2.3 million annually.
Oh,
Right. And
oh,
and and no operator, even the best of the best, budgeted that kind of. I mean, no one sees that. Everyone says, okay, insurance might go up 10% or whatever,
Oh,
not 130% in a year.
yeah.
We just renewed a Georgia property
Okay.
and it went up 54%.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
Okay.
now
Tell
the
me.
silver lining to all this is because the premiums are so exorbitant, there's a lot of other capital sources out there. They're like, wait a second, let's get into the insurance industry. This is like cash rich, right? That coupled with the fact that we actually finally had a pretty easy hurricane season and
Okay.
California didn't
Yes.
burn to the ground this summer.
That's correct.
Um,
No.
so it's actually looking like most of the insurance experts that I'm talking to are feeling like we will see premiums actually probably start coming down a little bit next year,
Okay.
with the assumption of there's not some other major multi-billion
Well,
dollar disaster.
and they've gone from, let's say it's 60%. Let's instead it's tripling. Let's say the average increase is a 60% increase in a single year, which just taking some of the numbers that you gave me, I'm going to go with 60% as a sampling. Coming down from 60% above what it was before, it still has room. I mean, it could come down 20%. We're still 40% over what it was before. Well, 20%
Yes.
would actually make it 50% given the reverse work. But you understand what I mean by it could come back down and it would still be greater than it was before.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I would be extremely surprised if we ever, excuse me, see it fall back to trend line, but we'll take anything we can get right
Yeah.
now. Like if it doesn't go up, if it actually comes down like 1% after the last 2 years, that's going to feel like a huge victory. So,
All right, so I'm going to double back to some of my previous questions real quick. So, what is it about your company and the secret sauce that you feel like your company offers? And is that based in your background? Because my previous question is, what in your history prepared you or helped you to be successful today? That probably is connected to the secret sauce of your company, because I generally find the partners are the ones that define the secret sauce of the company.
our secret sauce really is in our, I would say, our hybrid style of asset and property management.
Okay.
Technically that, and then just with relentless persistence and diligence. So when the last few years when everyone was bidding crazy prices on properties and doing it by getting these floating rate loans, we didn't do that. We fixed every loan we got, except for one that we had to get a bridge loan because it had a new construction element to it and all that. But even
Mhm.
then, we got a cap and we pushed it out, made sure we had 5 years, and did all those things. So I mean, I remember there's several years where I'm like, okay, what are we doing wrong? Everyone's buying all this stuff. We can't buy anything. And now, you know, very grateful and thankful that we took it slow.
Yeah.
Because instead of trying to keep the ship from sinking, we're just looking at, all right, cool. How do we take advantage of the upcoming opportunities?
And
But our
that's
secrets,
unusual, Andrew. I really have to give you credit for that. You know that, right? I mean, I interview multiple syndicators a year and I talk with several above and beyond that. And I know, like you said, all you got to do is throw a dart and you're going to find a syndicator that's underwater on at least one building.
yeah, I mean, we're hiring people to try to, because our properties are still producing cash flow. So yeah, we're hiring people to try to ready ourselves for I think a lot of opportunities. And
Yep.
for anyone who's looking, just slight diversion, I'll get back to
No,
secret
it's fine.
sauce.
It's fine.
um don't anyone who's looking to get into multifamily, either as a new LP or a new actual, like, just doing it yourself, don't let any of this scare you. All of this stuff that we're talking about, the doom and gloom and the headlines, that only affects people who already own buildings from like
That's
21
correct.
and 22. If you are getting in and starting now, this is like the golden opportunity that we've been waiting for the last 10 years. Because I mean, deals work fine at any interest rate. It's just a matter of getting the pricing to match up. So if you're coming in and you're getting a loan at 8%, that's fine, as long as the
The
property that you
property
pay
set
has the
for it.
right price. Yeah, the price matches that, and prices will be matching that soon. So again, this is it's only
Well,
a problem if you didn't put the right financing on a year ago.
and to support that, I mean, it was like, was it, I believe I've heard that about 60% of the people who put financing on in 2021 and 2022, 2020, 21 and 2022, that 60% of that was variable with no rate cap. And those are the guys that are suffering the most. The deals that
Yeah.
are suffering the most was the variable, that bridge loan without a fixed element to it, 7 year or 10 year, right? and has no rate cap, which means it's now floating with the market. And that is something that's very hard. Like you said, nobody would underwrite to having something triple or double generally in your numbers. We're not used to this, but it has made those buildings vulnerable. And so I love your point because it's particularly important. I'm looking to purchase into multifamily finally after a
Yeah.
decade. I'm like, finally I can maybe buy back into multifamily, get a little piece of my own again. Right? Because that's where I was years ago, right? Decade and a half ago, I was in multifamily and residential. That was what I did. And then, 2009, 2007, 8, and 9 showed up, and there I am getting wiped out, and I'm just pulling together all the capital I can. And I was on
Hmm.
the wrong side. I was in the place that the syndicators are that had the variable rate loan. I was licking my wounds instead of being prepared, right? Now, with
Yeah.
the stableness you're describing inside of your company, instead of licking your wounds and trying to figure out how to get out of the problems you're in, you're much more prepared to be able to partake in what we've been waiting for. And I really wanted to highlight that because there is going to be a lot of fear. There's going to be a lot of LPs that are going to be afraid. They're like, well, how do I know I can invest in a building? And it's like, well, you don't invest in the old buildings, you invest in the newer acquisitions that are underwritten to today's current interest rate, especially now
Yep.
that the Fed looks like they're probably done. Fingers crossed, the Fed is done. We hope, right? And that'll stabilize what the buildings are moving forward.
And then also keep in mind the current distress and the fact that no more, like new construction is falling like a rock in the well. This is setting up the next big upcycle that'll probably start in 2026 or 27. Again, assuming no crazy out of left field events.
Right.
And then also just to be fair, nobody actually saw this coming, including us. Nobody thought, okay, interest rates will go up 500 basis points in just over 12 months or
Yeah,
whatever the exact timing was. The issue is where nobody hedged for the extreme case, and
that's right.
and that's where it's caused problems. And so getting back to our secret sauce, it
Yeah.
turns out one of them is we're extremely risk adverse. So we did hedge just in case, because when interest rates were 3% for a mortgage, we just kind of looked at it and just said, well, okay, what does statistics tell you? Well, statistics says if you have the lowest interest rates in all of recorded history, the odds of them being lower in the future are probably smaller than the odds of them being higher.
Hmm.
So, just based on that, let's just lock these rates in. And, if rates go down lower, okay, we'll have some prepayment penalty, but that will be less of a pain point than if rates shoot up and all of a sudden we can't afford the debt anymore. So that way, it was just, I mean, it wasn't, we didn't see this coming. We were just applying statistics.
Right.
And then, so again, it's not, and there's some very good, savvy, smart operators that got caught by this. So it's not like just everyone who has a bad property right now is an idiot. That's definitely not the case. But again, it just kind of speaks to, how much things are hedged. So our secret sauce,
That's good.
one, again, is
Risk
just
averse.
being yeah, risk adverse and being patient. There were times the last few years where we'd go 12 plus months without buying something. But the other one is, and this is really comes down to the money is made in the operations. And we've kind of developed over the last 12 years or so, a hybrid asset property management arrangement where we do have a third party property management company to handle all the stuff that is an absolute nightmare of being a landlord, right? So they handle the evictions, they figure out why, they deal with the fact that the lady in 306C, her dog bit the kid in 306B.
Yeah.
They do HR, they do
Yeah.
payroll,
Yeah.
they run Yardi, they take care of the accounting, they help with sourcing vendors, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And what we do on our end is very hands-on asset management. So if you were to go to any of our properties and talk with the property manager or the maintenance people or anything like that, you say, "Hey, who do you work for?" They're going to say, "Oh, we work for Andrew and Kelly or Vantage Point." They're not going to say that they work for the property management company because
Mm.
we do weekly in-person calls over, not in person, but it feels like it. Weekly
We
Zoom
do.
calls, right, with the team, and that includes the maintenance people. The maintenance people are on the team. I mean, so on the calls, and we approach it with, our job
Mm.
as a company is to empower you being the on-site teams, to be able to do the most efficient and easiest, do your job as efficiently and easiest as possible,
Okay.
right? So it's not, yeah, we have KPIs, yes, we go through the financials, yes, we do all that on every meeting, but the tone is not, hey, how come you spent an extra $30 on on the golf cart this month because you
Yeah.
had needed to repair the headlight. It's all right, do you talking to the maintenance people, do you have all the tools that you need to get your turns done as fast as possible? Hey, if we bought a pressure washer,
Mm-hmm.
would it save money long term, and by letting you just take care of it, take care of it in house? Is there a different kind of paint that we could use? And then, but also just enabling and trying to empower them
Yeah.
to make decisions on their own, without having to just be mired down in bureaucracy. And then knowing that they can always come to us for, our, again, try to make it very clear, our job is, in addition to providing the vision and the direction, is to empower and serve them, because we can get things done that sometimes they can't.
That's right.
And I really think that has worked out to become our competitive advantage. And then also just getting to know, people. We align their incentives with ours. So obviously they have a base salary, but then they also, our team members have an uncapped NOI bonus, which means once we exceed a certain target in
Mm-hmm.
terms of profitability, they get a percentage of every dollar above that.
Mm-hmm.
Because how we look is like, number, these people are working their tails off to make us and our
Yeah.
investors, in many cases,
Yeah.
millions of dollars,
Yeah.
and they're making 40, 50, $60,000 a year. You know what? If they're making us extra money, they deserve a piece of that. So we have some property managers that make way above average, industry average, wages that you would never hire someone for, but they're earning it, right? And I mean, our philosophy is, if we're making extra money, then everybody should get a piece of that. So that's one. And then also we try to, you do things, get to know, again, this comes from building relationships and knowing people. We had one property manager who, like, her, call it bucket list item, lifelong goal was to go on a cruise. She'd never been on a cruise. And so we set it up where, she achieved a really impressive goal. And so, and her husband doesn't do cruises, right? So we're paying for her and her sister to go on a cruise, right?
Good.
So
Yeah.
just that
Yeah.
kind of stuff that, oddly seems unique. It's just, but I realize that is, a secret sauce. It's not AI. It's not, some magic data source. It's just really, I think, the relationship with, the people that at the end of the day really are the ones that make the business succeed. So
Can I riff on that for a minute, if I may?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right, because
It's your show.
it's my show. I guess I can, but at the same time, still, I just want to let you know what I'm doing. So, like, I've owned buildings directly. I had partners when I had a 257 door building I owned with a series of partners and stuff like that. But it was a joint venture type arrangement that probably was edging on a syndication, but don't tell anybody. And some, and some 50 units, 30 units, 18 units, smaller units, really mom and pop units, right? Those are the ones I've owned. And one of the things that I've noticed is the property managers are stuck in the middle. They're
Hmm.
between the building, the chaos of the building, and the vendors, and you, the owner. And really, usually their focus is towards the vendor and the building, because that's what really takes up 80% or 90% of their time. And it's like they start to build their identity, their loyalty, and their business model in that direction. But what you're describing is no, no, no. We meet with them once a week, and we're constantly looking to support them. We're constantly looking to grow them. We're constantly looking to understand what's happening. So things are a lot less likely to get stuck, and they're empowered to unstuck it. And it's not their boss that they're waiting. The boss is saying, hey, you understand, we're only making $800 a month on this particular building. So, or 1,600, or because I remember I'm doing mom and pop buildings, right? And so much smaller numbers. Um, but I can really see where they are stuck. But if they can get direct access to you guys, if the maintenance guy gets direct access to you, if the property manager, if the ones who are doing the lease ups get direct access to you and they're like, hey, you know what, we're having a hard time with this unit, nobody wants to lease it up, the floor plan sucks, or the blah blah
Hmm.
blah doesn't work, or the neighbor next door has the crying baby, or whatever it is that's making that unit, they're not hitting a wall with their own manager. They're actually getting access to the source of money where you can say, yes, we can choose to fix that in some way. Right? Does that make sense?
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So the level of empowerment of removing that wall and having you guys be that backstop is pretty amazing. I could see how you would get a much more efficiency in being able to have a direct conversation with maintenance versus telling your owner to talk to your assigned person to talk to the maintenance person as to what's the stall in fixing the drain.
Oh yeah, well, we hear it directly from the punch
Exactly.
tech because he's on the call, and sometimes especially on a new property or a newer team, we do have to work to say like if you're telling us the truth, you're not going to get in trouble on this call.
Right.
Like that's the fact we don't
Yes.
want
Because
polished everything's great.
normally they don't tell the truth. Normally they're
Yeah,
looking
like
to make it look all pretty and whitewashed and keep the chaos from you as the owner.
yeah, exactly. And we're like, no, 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 that's not why we're here. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
We're here. We can't help you solve the problems if we don't know the problems. And so that's one. And then also something else that we do is, everyone talks about masterminds, right? I think
Right.
probably most of your listeners
They
are
do.
familiar with going
Yep.
to all these different masters. So once a month, we do a mastermind where it's all of our property managers, no regionals, no one else, and we do a Zoom call and we do a property manager mastermind where they get to know each other. They share ideas, what's working, what are we struggling with, how can we help each other. We do the same thing with our maintenance team, our
Mm,
maintenance supervisors. We do a once a month Zoom call. And I'll just give one example of something that comes out of this. We had a property where a guy was, he had a lot of leaking toilets, and it was taking him an hour to an hour and a half to fix every one of them.
yeah.
And one of the other guys was like, "Dude, that should take 5 minutes. Hold on." And he runs to the shop and he grabs this part, and I barely know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver, so I don't know anything about maintenance, right? And this is
Right.
what's is cool because I get to learn listening to these guys. And he grabs this. Oh look, he goes, just buy these and do this and that, and it will take you 5 minutes. Next call, the guy's like, "Oh my gosh, this is saved me so much time, right?"
Right. Right.
And then now a couple of the other guys are like, "I'm going to do those too."
Right.
So and also a lot of the property when a property manager can be, especially if it's just a property that only has one manager and one maintenance, it's kind of
Yeah.
a lonely job,
Yeah.
right?
It
So to
is.
actually
It is.
have other people that know you can reach out to, both coworkers and
Yeah.
I think it really helps a lot. So yeah,
No, I
so
love that.
I'd say that's it.
No, I love that you revealed it that deep because I think that it is important. Creating a positive, people talk a lot about creating a positive culture in your building, right? And then people focus a lot on the tenant level in that conversation of the positive culture of the building. But what I love about what you're describing is a positive culture inside of the direct employees and being able to have them work together so there is a culture across all the buildings because they're actually literally meeting every month. Right? It's
Mhm.
not just, hey, you know what, they're doing this good job over in this building. I want you to use the same thing. And then you're now telling them what they should be doing, right? Versus
Exactly.
masterminding, where it's like, no, no, we're creating this together. There's a sense of ownership and empowerment in them being able to create for themselves or learn from themselves what it is that's working.
And they have internal chat groups, and I mean all kinds of stuff has
Yeah.
come out of that. And it's again it really yeah, it helps us, but it makes their lives better
I was
too because I
going to
say
say it creates efficiencies on your side as well, is what I'm hearing.
it
Like,
does. No,
yeah,
it's beneficial for everybody. Yeah.
right.
So.
All right, so you see, definitely, I love the secret sauce of the company, and thank you for revealing that detailed enough that I can even start implementing that in my own buildings. Although I'm, like I said, I'm not going to buy buildings as big as yours, and so you know, we've you've decided. Actually, I'm going to change it. Let me change the question. Tell me about a deal that went right, and how'd you set it up for success? And then I'm going to ask you
That's
about a deal that
right.
went wrong. By the way,
Yeah,
okay?
thankfully for the ones that went right, we've got a lot to pick from. I want I'm gonna go with a more recent one just to because it's easy to say, oh, we do this conservative, we hedge against this, but then it's like, well, what does that actually mean in execucution, right?
Hmm.
So this property, I want to say we closed in March of 21. That's if I sound, I believe that's when we picked it up. It was a 252 unit property in Florida, and it was off market, and it was a fortunate situation where a broker did bring it to us, and we uh, got into the position of being able to. It was being sold by the family who actually built it.
Oh,
It
okay.
was their
Mhm.
legacy asset,
Oh, okay.
and and then we actually went out, we met with the family a couple of times, and there were some other people bidding on it. Of course, we did end up getting the deal, but part of how we did that is, number one, building relationships with with the
Yeah.
family that owns it.
Yeah.
Two, we there was another offer that was like 1.2 million higher than ours,
Mm.
but we were came up with a creative structure that was actually more beneficial, and we said, look, Mr. Seller, um, if you actually reinvest back in the deal with this amount of equity, we're going to do cost segregation, and
Oh,
then you'll be a big chunk of the equity, then you'll get the cost segregation benefit. So not only will you defer the gain, we're going to give you a huge write-off, right? And I
mhm.
said, look, so this is go sit with your CPA and don't take our word on it. So it turns out that saves them like $2+ million. So even though our offer wasn't the highest dollar amount, the
Mm.
structure
Right.
netted the seller a couple million more. So creative financing. Another aspect of this deal that I love
Yeah.
is part of it, and again, this goes against everything they would teach you in business class, right? So the seller said, well, look, my son is the manager of this property, and there's a bunch of other people, you have to agree to hire them,
Right. Right. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And we're like, okay, this guy, he's only managed that one property, like, and he's that's not his main thing. And like, all right, well, but we figured, all right, you know what, worst case scenario, we agreed to 60 days, and after 60 days we can make a decision. Guess that his son, who to this day, a couple of years later, still manages the asset for us, is one of the best property managers that we have ever worked with.
Hmm.
Hardworking guy, and treats everyone well, very respectful, and not surprisingly, still treats those buildings as if he owns them himself, because he used to literally do that. And we would have never thought, oh yeah, okay, hire the former owner's son to run the properties. Like, that just sounds like a recipe for
It
disaster.
does. It does.
And candidly, that property is so far. We are something like 8 years ahead of pro forma on
Wow.
that asset, because number one, we bought it right. Two, he's doing a phenomenal job running it, and three, it is in a good market. And then the final piece of it is, again, we bought that when interest rates were very low, and we reasoned, well, the bigger risk is rates jumping up. So how do we head, how do we put, when you're buying commercial property, the idea is really, it boils down to is, don't try not to put yourself in a situation where you are forced to make a move, sell, refinance, or anything like that. So we said, all right, well, how can we do that? So what we did is we got agency Fannie Mae loan. We got a 12-year loan, because again, this was still, COVID was still a big thing in early 21. And so it was still kind of like, all right, we didn't know where the market was going to go, so like, we want to make sure we have plenty of runway. So we got a 12-year fixed rate loan. We're gonna say we're not going to float it. We're going to just we'll take the higher rate up front, but we know that we're 3.79 for 12 years. That gave us 7 years of interest only payments. Now here's the thing. So, and this is why we structure this way. All right, we think we want to sell this 6 years down the road. So let's say 6 years down the road, what happens? All right, if interest rates are lower, then that probably means cap rates are lower, and the value of this property is going to be through the roof, and we'll happily pay a little prepayment penalty. No big deal. 6 years down the road, interest rates are way higher. What do? We sell it on assumption. Say, hey, take over our loan at 3.79%. That preserves the value of the property. Not fully, but it helps preserve the value of the property. And The next problem is, well, if someone assumes my loan that I got in 2021, well, okay, the leverage might be low, and they might have to bring in a lot of equity. Well, if you sell on assumption on that type of loan that we got, the buyer can get a supplemental to get up to higher leverage and still keep our original interest rate. Now they're gonna have to pay market rate on their supplemental, which is the supplemental is kind of the equivalent of getting a second mortgage on your house, right? So, and then what if 6 years from now the market is a complete disaster? Okay, fine, we'll hold for 6 more years, right?
Exactly. That's where
Who
I was
who
going.
yeah, who
Right.
do you know that bought a nice, a well-located A-minus building of almost any kind 12 or 15 years ago and regrets doing that? Almost nobody, because time is your friend in real estate. So that is how you hedge risk. We structured it so that no matter what, almost no matter what, because you can't, no, we can't predict what the market's going to be 6 years from now. We barely know 6 months from now. So that's how you set yourself up for success: is structure your deal, your financing, all of it, so that you have a viable exit no matter what the market does. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously within
As
reason.
best
If
you
we get
can.
into world,
Right.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, if we're in World War III, all bets are off. But you look at the most probable outcomes and then build for that.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. All right, we only have a couple minutes left, but tell me about a deal that went wrong
Yep.
and
So we've
how did
never
you
lost.
fix it?
Yeah, we've never lost money, never lost investor money on a syndication. This is the one that came the closest.
Okay.
This
Interesting.
was back in 2013, so we'd only been doing this 2 years.
Yeah.
We did not have the processes and parameters in place that we do now, and that deal is part of how what where a lot of our current success comes from, because it gave us a whole long list of things to do and not do. We bought a large,
Yeah.
and I mean 350 unit, highly distressed. We called it a C. It was probably a D plus
Okay.
property in a very rough part of South
Mm,
Dallas,
okay. Yep.
and
I know those buildings. Yep.
yeah, and I have a little chunk of metal I keep on my computer tray, as a reminder that we never buy that stuff again. It's a bullet that I pried out of the drywall of one of the units, when I was doing a site visit one time. But
Yep.
so basically, what happened is we bought it. We started doing our renovations. We were getting our pro forma rent bumps. That wasn't the problem. The problem was the demographic was so rough that we would renovate a unit, someone would move in, pay rent for 3 to 6 months, stop paying rent, need to get evicted, destroy the unit, and we'd have to renovate it again every single time. Not to mention the stabbings, the shootings. Somebody crawled on top of the leasing office, knocked out the skylights, threw Molotov cocktails into the leasing office at 5 o'clock in the afternoon to try to burn it down. And it just the recurring capex and
Yeah.
headache factor was way more than we anticipated. And then in 2015, I don't know if you remember, Robert Kiyosaki even put out a book about the great crash of 2016, which fortunately never happened. But everyone in 2015 thought, or was convinced, a recession
Yeah.
was coming in
Yeah.
2016.
The charts were there. They were all.
Yeah.
I was in 2015 looking at the charts, going, okay, I think we're heading into it, and I yes, I was there. I was
Well,
one of those
and
people.
and we were on board with that too, and we said, okay, give it a couple more years. We had the right people in play. Like, we think we could turn this around and pull it off. However, if we, again, this just gets down to hedging. If we get into a recession next year, this is the absolute last kind of property you want to own, because in a recession, hard C properties get hit first and they get hit the hardest. And we're already kind of struggling. So we just said, you know what? Let's preserve. Number one rule: preserve capital. We just sold it early. Instead of waiting 5 years, we sold it a little after 2 years. We got an offer that allowed us to repay all investors, and I think the 2 year internal rate of return was like a 4.6%, or something ridiculously low like that. Low. But we just told everybody, look, we underestimated what it takes to and be involved in a property like this. I mean, there was vandalism. I mean, on and on and on. But the last most important thing is for us to protect your capital. So we're just going to say, you know what, we screwed this up. We shouldn't have bought it. We're going to
Mm,
sell, get
mm,
you your money back with a small return, and
yeah.
let's move on to better deals. And that is the worst property we've ever done.
Congratulations. Beautiful story. Well stated and well said. And very good of you to just kind of like give it up. 2 years in, like, this ain't working. This is going to continue to be a lemon building. This is a problem for multiple reasons. And you just gave it up. So tell me, Andrew, how do people get a hold of you? They want to invest with you. They want to follow you. I believe you're big on LinkedIn. So tell me how people get a hold of you.
I'm not big on LinkedIn, but I'm
Okay.
trying to. I'm
You're,
trying to. Uh, I'm not big on anything actually. I'm a peon, but I at
I
least
understand.
post on LinkedIn. And if you comment on something I post, that actually is me replying to you. It's not a bot
Okay.
or a virtual assistant in the Philippines or anything like that. So
Okay.
on social media, LinkedIn is the only one I'm active on. So please do connect with me there. And then, of course, our website.
What's your LinkedIn profile? Is it your name or is it your cat
Oh,
or is it your business?
that's a good point. I
Okay.
think it's Andrew Cushman VPA.
Okay.
I
Okay.
believe is the actual. You know what? Thank you. I need to know that off the top of my head. It's on my signature block in my email, but
I
yeah, I believe
understand.
it's just.
I know what you mean. One of mine is real Christina. The other one is Christina Suter. I'm like, oh, which one is which?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, and then of course, if you go to our website, yeah, if you Google Andrew Cushman or Vantage Point
Yeah,
Acquisitions,
Vantage Point
there's a
Acquisitions.
whole plenty of stuff comes up. So we're
Yes,
not hard to find. But on the website, there's more information. There's also a tab. A couple of tabs to connect with us, find out more about either what we do or getting up how to maybe get on the investor list and all that. And yeah, look forward to hopefully connecting with some people.
beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to Christina Suter on Real Estate Breakthrough. Andrew, thank you so much for being here with On Pitch Capital. So good to have you here. I just said your name wrong, so why don't you say it right? I said it was Von
Andrew.
Finch, but that's not your name.
Hey, I've been called far worse than that, so I'm okay with that. But no,
Vantage Point.
yeah, Vantage Point Acquisitions, Andrew Cushman.
Sorry, Andrew. All right. So make sure you tune in with Andrew, and thank you so much. You'll find us on a variety of platforms, including Amazon TV, Roku TV, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. And Andrew, you hang with me for a minute. Don't hang up.
All right, take care.